manipulation involved, and he probably knew that. And then things like jacks, again, kind of standard at full ring, but a look nonetheless. Okay, and again, because we see his hole cards, it means that he went to showdown. And because he went to showdown, it means we get to see his entire line with those hole cards. So I'm really trying to figure out what he's doing. So another situation where he calls with second pair post flop, and he checks behind, plays showdown value, and he does the same thing on the river, I assume. Yeah. Okay, and we'll look at the other jacks. And again, a lot of this is just looking at his lines post-flop. What can we infer from them? What can we infer from his sizes? What can we infer from his aggression, from his passivity? Does one thing hint another thing? And big things I'm looking for post-flop, again, I already mentioned sizes, but also aggression. You know, is he always c-betting? Is he always betting when someone checks to him? Or is it a situation where he tends to play more passive? Does he ever bet things like second pair, particularly on turns and rivers? And trying to infer why he's doing those things if we have the chance to. So he just calls here. Okay. And again, checks behind with second pair. So again, kind of a more passive type line. Just calls second pair. And obviously just calls getting 1,000,000 to 1. Okay. And tens again, see if we can see anything. Calls and calls, because he does that. Okay, now if he calls here, this is another hand that I want to take a note on. So again, my whole process when I first got into even finding this hand in the first place was to analyze what he calls two bets with. Well, I've noted that he calls open raises with tens and jacks. I've seen him do it 3 times now. And that probably means that he doesn't 3-bet these as a default. That's good information. So that means if he's not 3-betting things like jacks as a default, and obviously we don't know if he's ever 3-bet jacks, we're going to look at that next, but if we don't see him 3-betting jacks at all, it could mean that it's not in his 3-bet range, so his 3-bet range starts to look a very specific way. And then again, also looking post-flop as far as how he's playing it. Now when he's giving turn bets action, I definitely want to take a note kind of how he's doing it. So he has a slight overpair. He's called 2 streets. If he calls a third, I definitely want to pay attention to that. And also, he probably sees this player as a nit. You know, he most likely has a HUD, because I assume that most players running decent stats with a decent sample probably are using HUDs. And it's not too difficult to see that this person's probably going to look like a nit regardless of the sample size that he specifically has on him. So in this situation, check, and villain checks behind. I'm sorry, hero checks behind. Okay, and I'll also look at an 8's hand, see if he did kind of the same thing. Okay, calls to squeeze. And at this point, he shoves, so he calls and takes the huge draw. Okay. And again, we look at the smaller pairs. You know, smaller pairs are definitely things that I want to look at. Also, the same concept with things like double broadways, which we're going to look at next. And again, I'm looking at why did he call them? Where did he call them? Did he call them against a steal? Did he call them against an earlier middle position open? And as always, how he played post flop. Okay, so in this spot, he checks. Now, this is a spot that I'd also like to note, that he had a chance to stab in a multi-way pot when everyone checked to him, and he didn't take it. That's actually a very important note for me, because if I know that he plays in an exploitable way, or a predictable way, so to speak,